Kia ora and aroha nui, my Azaleas and Iyslander aficionados. Yeah, see, I can do it too, Ethan. Welcome back to the Clash format.
Oh, I don't know if that was quite the alliteration I normally do, Chris, but I appreciate the effort. This is another great match that we have today. So thank you for joining me in it. It's going to be, like you just mentioned, Azalea versus Iyslander here. So we're taking a look at some new heroes that we haven't seen before in this Clash format. And for anyone who doesn't know the Clash format rules, let's just jump into that real quick. So Clash is, once again, a young hero format where we're really pushing the thematics of what you can do when you're rarity locked to having commons and rares in most of your deck, except in the hero specialization, mentor, and weapon slot. When you can run anything in those rarities, what does your deck look like? What does your deck look like when you've actually got 60 cards you can work with? So there's, a bit of sideboarding, a bit of pre-boarding as compared to a format like Blitz. So there's a lot of questions to be answered in this format. We're really excited to keep bringing you gameplay for it and see what we can do to tinker around and find a perfect balance that really blends a thematic young hero experience with a beginner-friendly, just easy to pick up, wonderful experience that is Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, there's some really, really cool nuances about the format. The pre-boarding is a massive one, but I am a super fan of the specializations and how you can just use them, whatever the rarity. Iyslander, she's got that special privilege, or maybe lack thereof, of her specialization, Ice Eternal, coming in at rare anyway. However, on the other side of the metaphorical fence, Azalea, we're looking at something like a Knock the Death Whistle coming in at a super rare. That should still be able to do the trick, and I think any Azalea fan will be happy to have cards like this in the mix. Another new one that there's a high chance that we might see today is, of course, Sand Scour Great Bow, ready to take aim, pun intended, on Iyslander with some even more threatening ways to load the bow and really put her on ice. Totally irrelevant point there. Absolutely non-contextual, but the more puns, the better. It doesn't even matter if they make sense, but one thing that is going to make sense is a little bit more that we're going to learn about the matchup today, coming from you, my man, Sam.
Oh man, Chris, you are a natural at this, I gotta say. But hey, before we jump into these beautiful deck lists, let's take a look again at that bracket. Now, if you followed in the recent Clash games, we've got the first round 2 pairing already set thanks to our previous 2 matches. But don't forget, anyone who actually loses is still live in that loser's bracket round. But it's still pretty exciting. We're going to wrap up the week strong because these are 2 players that I think the community probably knows well enough.
Yeah, we have 2 community staples joining us today. Levia fans, you have Mansan, but Azalea, some might say there's Az from Go Again Gaming really flying the flag for the OG Ranger. Az from Go Again Gaming piloting the one and only Cult Queen Azalea. And on the other side of the arena, we have the breakdown gameplay guru himself, bringing the smoke. It's ethnic smoke on Iyslander, the Ice Queen. Now, he took this hero all the way to the top 8 back at the Calling Singapore. We were looking at a classic constructed format. Iyslander, she does pretty well in, Blitz and classic constructed. Today, we're almost doing a little bit of a hybridization of those. So we're taking 18 health with Iyslander. We're giving her some pre-board, sideboard options, and we're going to run her into one of the most beloved heroes of all time, Azalea, in the very capable hands of Az.
And let's actually take a look at that list right now. So this Azalea list, first thing I notice here, Chris, you were hoping for that Sandscour Great Bow, but I spy something even more spicy, and that is a Dreadbore in the weapon slot. Now, this is that mind game weapon where if you really respect everything Azalea can do, then the first question you ask yourself is what to do with your defense reactions. Do you even bring them in because of what Dreadbore can actually pose, preventing them being played out from hand? That's a pretty big deal. Beyond that, this list is including some pretty spicy cards, as you would expect from the cult leader, Az from Gogan Gaming himself. I see cards like Blue Dodge, which definitely, have me scratching my head a little bit. But hey, this is someone who is so far removed from my playstyle. I'm only on Levia. This guy's only on Azalea, so maybe he knows something I don't here. But the rest of the list looking pretty much like an aggressive Azalea build. a lot of arrows, a lot of go again outside of just what the arrows allow you to do, with some pumps as well to hopefully make this a bit of a cheeky game plan into Iyslander, squeaking out damage here, squeaking out a hit effect there. And I think you already said this, but hoping to put that Iyslander on ice.
Yeah, well, we've got some really cool stuff in Az's deck list here. You've got all the bangers like Fate Foreseen. You've got Oasis Respite, which is fantastic for preventing 4 damage. We've got Old Mate Sink Below, but hey, if that's not enough of defense reactions that defend for 4, why pay 0 when you could pay 2? We've got Toughen Up coming in from the sideboard here. Your beautiful card coming from the Classic Battles, which is also a Clash legal product. So we've got those massive on-hit effects and another one of the specializations. Such a treat to be able to bring this majestic rare into the mix, Red in the Ledger. So I'm excited to see what happens with this version of Azalea.
Oh, but even spicier, I think, is this Iyslander List. Because Iyslander is one of those heroes that actually, when you look at her power cards, most of them are already in that common and rare slot. I mean, after all, you're playing with the best weapon that she's got in a token slot anyway, with Waning Moon, and the rest of the deck is kind of built around there. You've got amazing 1-cost blues that this deck is just jammed-packed with, that Iyslander is going to be able to play out of her arsenal and just keep up that really steady trade going. So, nothing new, nothing exciting coming out of this, but you definitely see these cards slotted in, like Aether Ale, like Cold Snap, like Polar Blast, Winter Spite. These things were already cards that Iyslander was really eager to play, and now in a format where everyone else is maybe cutting some of their power cards, Iyslander definitely looks pretty strong.
Yeah, looking at this Iyslander list, if one were to compare to a Blitz or a Classic Constructed list, Ethnic Smoke's got a little bit of a deck building philosophy here, a bit different to the other ones. It's not so much how can I create a Clash deck list, but it's almost what are the very few cards that I need to take out of an almost established Blitz looking list. You look at this, you've got the Ice Eternals, you've got all of those massive red physical cards still just sitting in there. You've got all the Ether Ice Veins that you could want, and as you said, Ethan, almost all of the fantastic blue ice cards, which would be played out of Arsenal Instant Speed. They're all still there.
Yeah, it is puzzling because with the sideboard here, Iyslander is very eager to swap around her strategies, like playing more defensive with defense reactions. But will someone who's normally so prepared into every event he goes into, like Ethnic Smoke, be ready for the spice that is as running Dreadbore in Clash? I don't know, but I'm eager to find out. Oh, what a spicy matchup we have in front of us that is likely to perhaps cool down over the course of the game. We've got Iyslander trying for that tried and trusted game plan of just Waning Moons and 2-card hands and blues in Arsenal that we've seen time and time again across every format. But counter to that, on the left side of the screen, is perhaps the spiciest deck you could ever imagine. A Dreadbore Azalea piloted by Az from Gogan Gaming, who is just a comedian. The guy is hilarious, and I'm really ready to see him potentially punish this Iyslander, because when you're a player that plays these decks that are not super common, you tend to have the upper hand against the meta decks just by that little nudge of you knowing the matchup better than they do, because they've likely not practiced against it. So I'm hoping that comes through for Az here, because Azalea Iyslander, hey, that's definitely not a matchup I've seen before.
Yeah, Az really putting the Az in Azalea these days, and this Dreadbore is going to be very, very curious to see in action. You can't play defense reactions from your hand, so you should play them from the arsenal. But of course, Iyslander doesn't want to be playing defense reactions from the arsenal. That's where the blues live. We're starting off with Read the Glide Path Yellow from Az on the left here. He's doing a little bit of opting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he actually did win the die roll and chose to go first there as well. So this is perhaps his hope that Dreadbore is going to trip up the defense reactions that Ethnic Smoke unexpectedly put into his deck and land damage as freely as turn 0. That'd be great for getting ahead on the damage trade against Iyslander, because, going first as well, it has its upside in that Iyslander doesn't just get the free arsenal. So following that up with a yellow Nimblism into a yellow salvage shot. So nothing but yellows coming across here. And that's a card type that Iyslander doesn't get to look at much. They normally see blues and a couple reds.
Yeah, these yellows really complementing this beautiful Regicide Lights On playmat with a nice golden texture in the background. We're coming in for 9, and of course, if this hits, Smoke's going to take one more. Let's see what type of defense reactions we can come up with here. Probably 0 because it would be illegal. So turn 1, we're looking to probably put 3 cards in front of this one.
Yeah, and that seems to be exactly what Ethnic Smoke goes for, and it's a bit of an awkward block as well. If this was a game plan where he was more inclined to go for the Frost Hex route, well, they're just out of the deck, because, they are still hard capped at 2 in the Clash format, and that was 2 that were used to block immediately on turn 0. So there is no way for Ethnic Smoke to fall back on a slower Ice Eternal Frost Hex game plan. Just won't be viable anymore. But at the same time, he shouldn't be too worried about just blocking 9 and actually taking away even the arsenal from Azalea there. No damage traded.
Yeah,
Straight up.
Yeah, as I said earlier, Frost Hex not being legal in this format, I was just kidding. And what I meant by that was I know that 2 of these would be defended very soon in the game from Smoke here. So out of this game. We're coming in for a, what are we looking at? A casual 9 next to the Goliath Gauntlet. Another fantastic tournament series that we've seen recently. So shout out to those homies. Uber featuring in that one as well. 9 physical. Coming in as we are very used to seeing red physicals from the Iyslander. Whole lot of cards going down to equate to 7 defense from Az there. He's going to leak a little bit of damage, and then in his turn, we may see Az leak a little more as well.
Yeah, so what a contrast already. When Az threw 9 damage, it was as easy as let me block 3 on Ethnic Smoke's side and just defend the 9. But you see one of the Ranger hiccups. The deck doesn't defend super well, so Az, maybe with a non-functional hand there, threw down 3 cards, hoping to just buy that life, but it still didn't buy 9 life like 3 cards in Iyslander did. So falling behind, we've now got 18 life on the Azalea side to 19 due to that Findle's heal over on Ethnic Smoke. So already, life changes have just happened so quickly.
Yeah, it's very, very cool to see that 1 point coming in from Fjendal's Fighting Spirit, just tipping the scales a bit. A lot of the cards in Azalea's deck do have a defense value of 2, and so that's adding more intricacies to not only as having to have specific combinations of cards to set up really impactful on-hit effects, such as there could be a few dominates floating around. These things are very hard to set up, and that in combination with having to defend with more cards because the value is a lot of 2s, not so many 3s, that can really that can make things a little tougher for Az, even in the face of a fused Ether Ice Vein. 5 damage, and any damage dealt here, Az will have to discard a card or pay 2.
Oof, it's just such a tall order to answer those cards turn after turn, and Ethnic Smoke, as far as we know, is running potentially all 6 in this matchup. But we see Az respecting what that card threatens here, pitching a blue in to soak 3, and then paying a yellow back in to soak off of the otherwise discard effect there, and pitching in now even a red on top of the Waning Moon. So committing 3 cards on the defense there to still end up leaking 3 total, that can't feel great. But it's all this. It's all about sequencing up for a big turn in Ranger, because so many hands can be a little bit too clunky for them to really push through what an Iyslander might interrupt them with, even it just being 1 Frostbite.
Yeah, and taking those sort of turns off, turns on, setting things up with Az is what he's looking to do, and a card that's one of the best in the game for having a turn off and allowing you to set things up is Red Snatch, or any Snatch, of course, the red coming in for 4, a nice breakpoint. Looks like Smoke's going to be putting 1 card with a block 3 in front of that one. Take 1, he'll allow Az to draw a card, but without go again, it does seem almost redundant because the arsenal is already in place. However, Azalea does have a few abilities in her toolkit to move those arsenal cards around, so it could come into play at some point.
Ooh, but speaking of that arsenal, Ethnic Smoke is going to lock it down. Glacial Horns is a card that came up a lot recently, mostly due to the prevalence of Uprising Draft being everywhere, which, hey, nothing wrong with that. But Glacial Horns locking that arsenal and actually synergizing immediately with this Succumb to Winter. Succumb to Winter actually destroys the arsenal. It doesn't have to deal damage even. Just if that arsenal is frozen and you target a hero, then it blows up. So Ethnic Smoke actually just giving it a bit of a closer read. I remember from the mics that they were a bit confused about the interaction as well. But no, it just says blow up. So what a huge tempo buy, because that snatch came through and drew that card. That was a little bit washed because the arsenal's already full into Ethnic Smoke, blowing up arsenal just at the cost of a headpiece here, and still presenting 5 arcane, not even counting what the moon might do yet. Just crazy turn cycle.
Yeah, when a player is reading their own card out of disbelief of how powerful it is, similar to what we might be seeing from Az showing us this fantastic card from Classic Battles, you know that a card is good if both players are checking to see if what it does is truly what it does, because blowing up an arsenal against any player is powerful, but against Azalea, who wants to sort of use that arsenal, loading, opting, moving things in and out, it's probably even more effective than it is against other heroes. We're preventing 4 of that damage. Is there a way to prevent 1 more? No, Az is going down to 16. We've got a 2-point life difference now.
Yeah, so this is a turn that definitely presented a lot of what was otherwise unblockable arcane, but the Oasis Respite in that sideboard coming up huge, obviously, preventing a huge chunk of that Succumb to Winter. Now, I think overall the way he paid for it was actually paying 2 in and then Oasis on top of it, so a little bit of an inefficient block on the entirety of the arcane that turn, so some still leaked through overall. But, you know, the strength is still there in having the agency to run Oasis, whereas in Blitz, you just are locked to what you have in deck. So that might speak to what Az has as an overall strategy. We're seeing him just really slow down and pitch as much as he can into the arcane damage. So perhaps that's the overall plan. Slow down himself and wait out the Iyslander's arcane effects while you don't necessarily lose cards from your deck to do so. You're pitching them right back in, but there's so many tall arcane effects that the damage continues to leak, especially with 5 more coming out of this Aether Ice Vein.
Yeah, this Aether Ice Vein, just before that we saw an Amulet of Ice. This Ice Vein's fused, and there's a whole lot going on here. There's 5 coming in, but at any point in Az's turn, later on in the game, there's not only 1 but 2 Amulets of Ice waiting to take more cards out of Az's hand. He'll also have to be dealing with a Waning Moon, but right now it is 5 Arcane coming straight for Azalea's face, and if one of these points hits, it's going to be, wow. Speaking of fusions and discards and interruption, we've got the Amulet of Ice triggering to take a card out of Az's hand potentially before the 5 comes through, and that's really, really going to cause a hindrance to the prevention of the arcane damage, which if that hits, he's going to lose another card. So a whole lot on the table for Az to deal with at the moment.
Yeah, I think, slight correction, this is after the arcane damage is already resolved here. What Ethnic Smoke is trying to do with these amulets is this whole idea of, okay, if I set up a damage card in Arsenal, then I'm going to be able to throw damage when Az has 0 cards in hand because I'm clearing them out right now with Amulet of Ice. So by sacking those, Az's turn just becomes, okay, pass. And when an Iyslander player hears pass, that's go. That's green for them. They will play out a blue in Arsenal. They will smack you with Waning Moon. They'll do what they can to just hit you with damage. So on the flip side here, sure enough, Az just doesn't have cards in hand, but he still has some game actions he can take, namely the Azalea.
Yeah, using the hero ability, having a look at the top card of the deck, we saw a blue. Nothing changed in the Arsenal zone there, so now it's over to Iyslander to see if there's any response to this one. And out of the Arsenal, instant speed, making a Frostbite, we've got Ether Hail. It's only coming in for 2, but of course, 2 and then 2 more. Turn after turn.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of that.
Looking.
It's that cookie cutter play. You know, play out the blue that cost 1 into Waning Moon, now for 3 on the opponent's turn. And poor Az just has to shed a tear that's slowly freezing as it falls down his face because there were no cards in hand at all for him to interact with that. That just was 5 damage for free that Ethnic Smoke got to land. And, you know, when we look at the life, it's 10 life different, and we don't really see Az building up into a big return. So I feel really scared for the spot he's in.
Yeah, those Amulet of Ices really, really did a lot of work, taking Az to 0 cards, passing his turn, and now 4 more coming in with a red piece of work. We're preventing 3 of that. Looks like we're taking 1. Here comes 2 on Smoke's own turn from the Waning Moon. That's right, you can use it in your turn as well. Going down to 7 now from Az, and he's looking to set something up, but of course, the more time that he takes to set up, the more times the moon will come in.
Oh, he's going to respond actually to that moon with Oasis Respite. So he might have seen how fast his life was dropping and wanted to perhaps hold the Oasis for a bigger attack, but then with the moon's response, it forced it out just right then and there. Because that moon was just 2. Oasis otherwise can block 4. So I think we might just see a bit of floundering from Az here to try to prevent all this arcane damage that's coming through turn after turn, because the turn cycles will always just line up a bit better for how Iyslander wants to play it. Because if you sack all your cards paying into arcane on one turn cycle, Iyslander will just play on the other, and back and forth until you just die.
Yeah, well, as trying to not die just yet, we've got Read the Glide Path, putting 3 extra power on this bolt and shot, coming in for 6. Will this be enough to worry Ethnic Smoke here? He does have a card in the arsenal ready to go. There's no huge on hit from this bolt and shot, so with that life sort of cushion, I was thinking maybe he'll take it, but still preventing or defending for 3. Taking just 3 damage, but Iyslander doesn't really need 4 or 5 card hands to be a nuisance. Just a few, maybe 1 or 2 from the arsenal. This time we're seeing a red one from the arsenal in Smoke's turn. 4 arcane damage to the face. This will allow Waning Moon to come in for 2 later on in the turn. But right now, Az is looking at half of his life total, and he's going to have to throw away more beautiful blue cards.
Yeah, and just to note, it might have seemed awkward at some point for Ethnic Smoke to have those defense reactions in his deck when he stared down the Dreadbore. Like, just there, he pitched a Sink Below. But when you're this ahead, I'm sure he's looking at that card and just saying, oh, okay, well, I'll just pitch it, because pitching anything converts to damage, and damage is how I win this game. So I don't think the Dreadbore is not quite landing the way that Az wanted to. But just because we see the life just continuing to tick down.
Yeah, no defense reactions, of course, being played in front of the Dreadbore. None of them being played at all. Very awesome point that you made, Ethan, pitching the Sink Below, just getting it out of the way. But it's almost sort of just 2 turns on either turn to finish this thing up as far as Smoke's looking. Here comes a Emeritus Scolding. That's looking at 4. Then the moon's looking at possibly another 2 more, and then there's also the hour turn part of things. So 5 points of life now for Az. Things are looking a little bit shaky.
Yeah, this is actually still on Az's turn, so it's always hard to track here because Iyslander is just always saying, it's our turn, it's our turn. Sometimes even more so than Kano, because they're truly doing it every turn cycle, whereas Kano might just jump in for when it's lethal. But we just see unrelenting pressure. These hands are smooth as butter for Ethnic Smoke here. That is just a 2-card hand for 7. No life gain needed because he's at 15 to Az's 2.
Yeah, well, 3 cards defending up to a total of 9 there. One huge indicator of when it truly is the Iyslander player's turn is a massive red physical attack for 7. So that was great to see. Now, more magical cards coming through. 3 arcane. We're preventing 3 of that one. We're preventing 2 of that one. We're going to 1, and Moon finished things off.
Yeah, you can't prevent all that. That was a lot to handle. Yeah, unfortunately, Azalea could not release herself from those icy clutches of Iyslander. Too much back and forth, playing on our turn again and again and again. Ethnic Smoke really played it masterfully, so hats off to him. But poor Az, I think, just didn't really find his window to try to get back into the game there, and just fell into a defensive strategy that doesn't quite work when Iyslander is throwing arcane damage on both turn cycles so effectively.
Yeah, Azalea has so many tiny, intricate moving parts, and you really need a good combination of arrows, pumps, the right opt, the right things to go to the right place at the right time. And in this format in particular, especially against Iyslander, if you do slip up or take 1 turn off at the wrong time, It's going to be an avalanche of destruction for the Azalea player, and it was what we saw. There was, as was trying to hang in there a little bit. We were doing a lot of pitching, a lot of damage prevention, but then, of course, when the time came to strike back, unfortunately, the quiver was out of arrows. So, fantastic game from both players. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to crawl back. I'm not going to make another snow reference there or anything like saying snowed under. But if I were to, that's what I would say. Great game, very challenging, and fantastic play from both Ethnic Smoke and Azalea's #1 fan, Az from Go Again Gaming.
I feel like you just teased 2 new cards to us, Avalanche and Quiver. I mean, now I'm excited, Chris.
I'm quivering with excitement myself. Huh? I see what you did there.
But hey, thanks for tuning in for today's match. Just a reminder, the loser's not out yet. Az is going to be playing that loser's bracket while we've got Ethnic Smoke moving on to face whoever wins in that gripping next game, Kasai versus Bravo, a much more mid-range game, hopefully a lot longer. That we'll be catching next week. But speaking of next week, I'm about to take a family trip for Thanksgiving, so uploads are going to be a little slow because I just won't be home to edit through it. So bear with me on some of those delays. I know, I'm sorry. But that's just how it is, and I really can't wait to get back for streaming and editing and just putting all this out there for y'all. But hey, just got to bear with me.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much again for having me on this incredible series and the work that you've put into putting all of this together, and all of the content creators and players who are involved. This is some exciting stuff. So thanks for having me. I look forward to more, and top of the morning to you, Ethan.
Thank you, Chris.